Have you ever wondered why, even after brilliantly arguing your position, you're left with the feeling that you've lost the debate? Have you ever felt as though every word uttered doesn't bring you closer to victory, but rather pushes you further away? Perhaps there are people in your life who, by raising their voice and interrupting others, seek to dominate, masking arrogance with a facade of confidence. And perhaps you've fallen prey to the common belief that silence is a sign of weakness, that refusing to defend your interests is akin to surrender, and that a lack of response signals defeat. But what if all of this is merely an illusion? What if true strength lies not in words, but in the ability to remain silent at the right moment? Friedrich Nietzsche, one of history's most controversial thinkers, managed to perceive a truth many are afraid to acknowledge. He asserted that excessive talkativeness leads to excessive openness, and the very need to persuade others indicates a weak position. The modern world imposes upon us the idea of needing to fight for our convictions, to defend our ideas, as if every conversation is a battleground for truth. However, there is another, more subtle and effective approach. The philosopher believed that silence is not merely the absence of sound, but a powerful presence capable of unsettling and destabilizing an opponent, forcing them to look within themselves. For those who feel overshadowed, whose words are drowned out by the general clamor, whose merits go unnoticed. For those who leave conversations with the feeling that their true thoughts never reach the ears of their interlocutors. For those tired of being an easy target, the nice guy, striving for harmony, while others shamelessly exploit their peaceful nature. Perhaps you mistakenly took your silence for surrender. Yet, silence can become your most formidable weapon. True victory lies not in triumphing in an argument, but in the absence of the very need to engage in one. Prepare to view silence from an entirely new angle, not as the absence of a response, but as the final verdict. Let's delve into this concept and discover how you can masterfully control any situation without uttering a single word. Why are we possessed by such an indomitable need to respond, refute, correct, and prove ourselves right? The answer lies in a deeply ingrained belief that truth must be defended at all costs. We feel that by remaining silent, we allow our opponents to prevail. But, as Nietzsche astutely observed, this reveals our profound weakness, the fear of appearing vulnerable. Behind this fear lurks the ego, fragile and easily wounded. An ego that painfully perceives any doubt in its rectitude, that confuses disagreement with aggression, and transforms every conversation into a fierce battleground. Friedrich Nietzsche argued that in the heat of an argument, most people aren't truly pursuing truth, but rather striving for power. They crave validation for their own beliefs, not because of their unwavering conviction, but out of fear that if their beliefs are refuted, their entire worldview will collapse. In such a context, argumentation transforms from a tool of discovery into defensive armor, into a desperate cry of the ego striving to maintain control over the perception of reality. What does this mean in practice? As soon as one feels the need to justify and prove themselves right, they inadvertently enter someone else's game and lose. The very necessity of defending one's position indicates that they are still captive to the desire to be accepted, recognized, and understood by others. Nietzsche called this herd morality, a behavior characteristic of those who live under the burden of others' expectations and strive to appear good, proper, and just in the eyes of others. However, it is precisely this craving for approval that makes one weak. True strength, according to Nietzsche, lies not in the ability to convince others, but in the absence of such a need. It manifests in the ability to firmly adhere to one's vision, even when facing mockery, criticism, and rejection. It lies in remaining misunderstood while maintaining unwavering resolve. The philosopher proposes a concept of strength measured not by verbal victories, but by inner self-possession, the ability to remain calm amidst widespread panic, and composure when everyone else loses control. This strength grows as one ceases to react to external stimuli. To achieve true victory, it is necessary to realize that any discussion is merely a theatrical performance, and the one who first takes the stage has already lost. The reactive mind, according to Nietzsche, is subordinate. The truly dangerous mind is the observant one, which transcends the need to prove anything. But if reactions are to be avoided, how does one exert power over others? If words betray, how can one make others feel their strength without uttering a single phrase? Nietzsche had an answer to this question as well, one that lies in the ideal of the Übermensch, a being who transcends the limitations of ordinary morality and dominates the world through absolute self-control. It is this figure who embodies the strategic use of silence as a weapon of dominance. From this moment on, silence begins to speak for itself, becoming more eloquent than any words. Friedrich Nietzsche crafted his works not for the faint of heart, but for the chosen few who possess the courage to look deep within their souls, embrace their suffering, and transform it into a source of strength. In his view, the common person is entangled in a web of social conventions, moralistic precepts, and a thirst for universal approval. However, there exists another category of people, rare, dangerous, and free. The Übermensch doesn't merely react to the world around them. They actively shape it, imprinting it with their own characteristics. Notably, this process often unfolds in silence. The Übermensch has no need to win arguments or engage in manipulative emotional games. They prefer to observe, analyze, and only then, after careful consideration, speak or, more importantly, remain silent, having realized a truth that eludes others. Silence is also a language, one that doesn't seek to persuade but rather asserts presence. The silence of the Übermensch is imbued with meaning. It carries a hidden threat, undeniable authority, and self-possession. While others raise their voices, they command respect with a single gaze. While others try to prove a point, they, maintaining composure, expose others' weaknesses. Their silence is like an impenetrable wall, forcing those on the other side to agonizingly guess what lies beyond it. In this desperation, they act rashly, reveal too much, and lose their composure. However, this silence is not a manifestation of passivity, but represents absolute control over one's own energy, a strategically calculated conservation of resources. The Übermensch understands that every word spoken is a revealed tactic, and every emotional reaction is a display of vulnerability. This is why they remain silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because they feel no need to prove anything to anyone. Their very presence speaks for itself and causes unease, as their silence forces others to turn inward and confront their own chaos. In a world full of noise, those who have mastered the art of silence become true masters. Friedrich Nietzsche envisioned the Übermensch as a creator of their own system of values, a code of rules and moral principles. This individual does not require external approval, which is precisely what frightens those around them. For nothing is more destabilizing than an individual impervious to manipulation through guilt, fear, or the desire for recognition. Their silence serves as a reliable defense against such mechanisms of influence, and when they do decide to speak, their words are capable of toppling entire empires. In this regard, a legitimate question arises. Why does silence cause such anxiety in others? What makes so many people feel threatened when someone simply refuses to react? What processes unfold in the human mind when an anticipated confrontation is met with oppressive silence? The answer to this question lies in the depths of psychology. To comprehend the true power of silence, one must understand the chaos it generates in the minds of others, and this phenomenon is far more complex than it appears at first glance. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, it is a unique mirror, and the reflection it presents to many proves unbearable. When one chooses silence, they not only deprive themselves of a voice, but also force the other person to hear their own voice, to confront their arguments without the familiar support of external resistance. This is destabilizing, because most people speak not to express their thoughts and feelings, but to defend themselves, to convince themselves of something, to conceal the gaping void between their words and their true essence. And when silence descends, the mask concealing this emptiness falls away. In the realm of human interaction, where interests clash and disputes ignite, social psychology reveals an interesting phenomenon. Silence in confrontational situations is often interpreted as a form of judgment. Regardless of whether a person is simply listening, the absence of a verbal reaction can make the speaker feel vulnerable and insecure. Why does this happen? The reason lies in a loss of control over the conversation's flow. The human brain, Striving for certainty, in the absence of feedback, enters a state of heightened anxiety, which leads to the activation of the amygdala, the brain region responsible for fear and anxiety. In this situation, one begins to project their own fears and doubts onto the silent interlocutor. Questions arise. Are they judging me? Did they notice my insecurity? Did they uncover my deception? On this psychological battlefield, silence becomes an invisible weapon, striking where no one sees, but everyone feels. Long before modern psychology confirmed this effect, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche observed that the ordinary person often lives by their impulsive reactions. They act out of vanity, speak from a fear of being ignored. In contrast, the higher spirit, possessing self-control, prefers silence, realizing that every word spoken can be used against them. Every emotional reaction is an involuntary signal pointing to vulnerable spots. Moreover, silence has a destructive impact on manipulators, individuals who seek emotional control over others. Such individuals depend on the reactions of their victims to maintain their power. The absence of a reaction from the object of manipulation breaks this cycle, causing panic in the manipulator. They need a response to confirm their dominant position. Without it, they are lost, revealing their true essence and displaying the weakness they so carefully concealed. However, there is an even more significant aspect. Silence can awaken old, unhealed wounds. It touches upon deep-seated traumas related to rejection, feelings of abandonment, and humiliation. One suddenly realizes that their words lose weight, and their presence makes no impression, which inflicts a crushing blow to their self-esteem. This is why silence becomes not just a defensive measure, but a powerful weapon aimed at the very heart of vulnerability. The application of silence requires considerable willpower. It causes discomfort not only for others, but also for the practitioner themselves, as it goes against habitual reactions, the urge to justify and explain one's actions. However, it is precisely in this that its strength lies, in the necessity of overcoming oneself and achieving mastery, which is the true manifestation of power. Now that it's clear how silence impacts the interlocutor's mind, how it exposes their insecurity, dismantles their defense mechanisms, and rips off their masks, it's time to move from mere observation to actively using this power for your own purposes. You must learn to transform silence into a conscious weapon, allowing you to prevail in any argument without uttering a single word. By mastering this art, one gains independence and control over the situation. The time has come to stop being content with a theoretical understanding of the power of silence and begin to apply it in practice. For knowledge not backed by action remains merely useless theory. From this moment on, anyone can master the art of transforming silence into a powerful tool of influence. This is not merely about passive defense, but about creating a sharp weapon capable of revealing the true intentions of those around you at the most unexpected moment. The first step on this path is curbing your impulses for immediate reaction. This will require considerable inner strength, as the natural inclination will be to justify yourself, to prove yourself right. However, you must realize that such a reaction is a trap. By succumbing to it, one demonstrates their dependence on others' opinions, their entanglement in someone else's game. True silence is born from the realization of one's own independence, from the understanding that truth does not require constant confirmation. The second tool in the arsenal of silence is observance. While others expend energy on empty talk and explanations, you should listen intently. But listen not as someone waiting for their turn to speak, but like a seasoned hunter attuned to every rustle in the forest. You must learn to perceive the fears and doubts hidden behind words. Notice subtle contradictions and insecurity masked by arrogance. All these details must be remembered so that, at the right moment, you can deliver a precise, calculated strike. The third element is timing. It's crucial to maintain a pause. A pause creates tension, and tension is power. When a person speaks, expecting an immediate reaction, and receives only silence in return, they experience internal discomfort. Their mind begins to fill the silence with guesses, fears, and paranoid thoughts. A simple gaze, accompanied by silence, can have a far greater impact than dozens of carefully chosen phrases. The fourth tool is unpredictability. By mastering the art of silence, one becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability always evokes fear. People are left guessing, unsure of what to expect, and consequently, they lose their advantage. They begin to weigh every word, to act cautiously. Thus, the logic of interaction changes dramatically. From a reactive individual, one transforms into the focal point of the conversation. At this moment, silence is not an absence, but a manifestation of absolute dominance. However, one should not mistakenly believe that silence is synonymous with passivity, for Friedrich Nietzsche was by no means an apologist for weakness. This refers to an active silence, filled with inner tension and purpose. One does not merely refrain from words, but prepares, carefully chooses the moment, and assumes a posture radiating a power that doesn't require demonstration to be felt. And when the opportune moment arrives, when silence has already expressed all that is necessary, one can drop just one phrase, a precise comment, something that will end the discussion not through its loudness, but through its truthfulness, depth, and irrefutability. But this leads to an even more subtle aspect. Up to this point, we've discussed how to use silence to achieve victory. However, there are situations where the goal is not only triumph, but also emotional survival. There are times when people don't just engage in arguments, but use, manipulate, and drain you. And you, unaware, daily give away a piece of your strength. You find yourself under the weight of dominance that may not be accompanied by a single word. This is where the darkest stage of this journey begins. When silence ceases to be a strategy and transforms into the silent cry of someone who has lost control over their own life. We will delve into this bitter truth and show how you can become an object of manipulation without even realizing it. For while you naively believe you are avoiding conflict, someone might be building their empire by using your silence for their own purposes, and Nietzsche, the insightful philosopher, already foresaw such an outcome. What could be more destructive than forced silence? Only the conviction that silence is your only option. The habit of suppressing anger, yielding in arguments, avoiding any confrontations. All of this is mistakenly taken for maturity and a sign of inner peace. But what if this is merely a trap? In many cases, such silence is not wisdom, but a veiled surrender. Friedrich Nietzsche pointed this out with striking clarity. What many call peace often turns out to be merely humble defeat. Have you noticed how some people abuse your calmness, your ability to listen and overlook, your desire to avoid confrontation? They impose their ideas, their will, invade your personal space, and you allow it. You convince yourself that the struggle isn't worth it, that it's better to maintain harmony, that it doesn't really matter. But the truth is, this supposed peace comes at a high price. The worst part is that you are being used by those who understand you will never fight back. Nietzsche spoke of slave morality, a system of values created by the weak to survive in a world dominated by the strong. It is a morality of submission, guilt, and the desire to be good. An invisible code that teaches self-suppression, self-abasement, obedience, and yet makes one feel virtuous. However, Nietzsche did not write for those willing to submit. He addressed those who dare to break these chains, to those who realize they are being manipulated and decide to stop participating in their own oppression. By embracing such silence, which corrodes from within, one gives away their power without even realizing it. They are shaped by others' expectations, ceasing to be themselves and becoming what others want them to be. And this is the complete opposite of what Nietzsche called the will to power. True will to power is not about shouting or dominating others, but about self-mastery. It is reclaiming control over one's own life, silence not out of fear, but because you owe nothing to anyone. The era of submissive silence must irrevocably become a thing of the past, giving way to the silence of conscious presence. This silence knows no compromises, does not diminish dignity, and does not justify its right to exist. It rises above the commotion, capable of altering the course of events through its mere existence, without a single word. Such silence would have earned the respect of Friedrich Nietzsche himself, the silence of a person who has achieved complete self-control. But how does one reach this pinnacle? How does one transform from a puppet of circumstances into the master of their own destiny? How does one eradicate the herd instinct within oneself and be reborn as an individual who commands authority simply through their silence? The key lies in Nietzsche's most brilliant philosophical concept, the idea of the Übermensch. This concept has been mentioned before, and now it is time to reveal the secrets of achieving it, to understand what is necessary for the embodiment of this new type of human being. The modern world is tired of empty talk. It craves those who have mastered the art of silence and can rule through it. The culminating moment has arrived, and it's crucial to realize with absolute clarity. Silence is not an absence, not emptiness, nor a pause between words. True silence is embodied presence. It is mastery. It is a sign that one has ceased to be a passive observer and has begun to shape the world around them through their very existence. Nietzsche didn't write for those content with mere survival. He wrote for those striving for self-overcoming, who are willing to tear off the masks imposed by society, even if it causes pain. The silence emanating from a person who transcends the ordinary is fundamentally different from the quiet submission of the oppressed or the timid flight of a coward. It is rather the restraint of a warrior who has triumphantly concluded the battle before it even began. It is the self-possession of an individual who no longer feels the need for external validation, possessing an unshakable confidence in their own worth and an awareness of their place in the world. Now, turn your gaze inward and ask yourself, how often have you remained silent, dictated by fear, guilt, or the desire not to disrupt a fragile peace? How many times have you allowed others to dictate terms, voice their opinions, and trample on your personal truth? But enough. Friedrich Nietzsche would undoubtedly brand such an existence as an insult to the very essence of being, and would view the acceptance of such silence as a betrayal of oneself. From this moment on, silence must take on a different resonance. It must cease to be a cowardly escape from problems, transforming instead into an unheard yet commanding cry of authority, an impenetrable boundary asserting the uniqueness of one's personality, even if it remains misunderstood by the majority. For the true essence of a person does not require universal approval. It demands to be brought to life, which, in turn, requires considerable courage. The weak are prone to shouting and complaining. The strong prefer silence, and the wise know when to speak.